Back to A Thunder Upon the Land. We are looking at the Battle of Poltava here. Hopefully this goes better than the Battle of Narva, and it's more interesting than the Battle of Narva. Different map. This is on the back side. Again, potentially 10 turns, though I suspect it will probably end sooner than that. You've got the Russians. Almost every unit in this scenario, by the way, is cavalry, so we will get some cavalry charges, which is a part of the rules that the Battle of Narva didn't really explore. Well, at least I stopped before we could even do cavalry charges. But you've got all of these Russian cavalry broken into different divisions, stretched out along this line of rough terrain. They've got these redoubts here with artillery stacked up in them. And then you've got this fortified camp for the Russians, mostly the Russian infantry, but Tsar Peter is down here as well. They're going to get a chance to, when they activate, move out and potentially move into the Swedish line. The Swedes, again, outnumbered here, but they do have the better quality troops. And they're kind of in an interesting position. They get victory points for overrunning these redoubts, so and they get to go first. They have the initiative, so I've elected to have them start with their center. They probably want to overrun as much of this artillery as they possibly can early. You can see that some of the artillery I've decided to face in different directions in case the Swedes got cute. So at least, hopefully, it could fire before it gets destroyed. But the one thing the Swedes do have to worry about is that there are points for the Russians for capturing Pavlenka back here. That's where the Swedish baggage train was stationed. And this first division of cavalry here is kind of positioned to sort of sprint out of these woods and try a flanking maneuver here. They can move quite far. They can move up to 16 hexes if they don't get within 3 hexes of a Swedish unit. So this flank cavalry force over here on this left flank for the Swedes is probably going to have to play a little bit of defense. They're not going to be able to kind of converge here because of the threat of the Russian advance. We'll see what the Russians want to do there and what the Chits allow them to do. Russians have a small left wing here. There is some cover for this cavalry force to come through these woods and try and flank this area, some of these redoubts, although they do have to be careful of the infantry. Sorry about the light. It's kind of, I'll move that up. Okay, So that's kind of the situation. It looks like it may play a little more balanced, a little more dynamic, a little more even, a little more fun than the Battle of Narva, and I hope that is the case. Both sides, I believe, will get points for controlling these villages here, and there's not as many that the Swedes have, but they certainly can pick off points here and there. Again, the combat system is really bloody, so I'm not sure how long this will go, but we're going to get started, and I'll keep you apprised of the situation. Also want to mention, before we get going, that if you have not watched my Battle of Narva video on this game, go ahead and check it out. I mean, you maybe not want to watch the whole thing, but it does explain sort of the game and some of the mechanics potentially for you to look at if that's kind of the thing you're interested in. Let's show you how combat works in case you didn't watch my other video, or actually I don't think I did one in that video, but I'll explain the situation here. In the middle of turn 1, the Swedes started with the center. They overran this redoubt, eliminated the artillery unit there. They then drew out of the cup the high command chit, which allows them to activate a die roll's worth of units plus a leader of their choice. They chose to activate the center again, try and get as much ground as possible on these redoubt units. Good start again for the Swedes. They seem to have all the luck. These 4, they got 7, by the way. So there's 2 units under here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all moved up. These guys screening this flank from when the Russians inevitably come for them. These units had enough movement points to move in and use volley fire, so they're going to do some musket volleys against this artillery and this redoubt. So the way this works is you calculate the strength. Here's the defense. The artillery has 3. He's in a redoubt. That adds +1, so he has 4. Then you add the attack strength of everyone who's attacking, and that is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's 10 to 4. Plus all the infantry units getting volley fire are another +1 each. So it's 14 to 4. So already pretty stacked the deck against the Russian artillery unit there. So 14 to 4, and I don't believe there is, because this artillery unit's in a redoubt, all of his hexes are front hexes. You can't flank in a redoubt. So I think it's just 14 to 4, and then we roll the d10s, and we add that d10 roll to that strength, essentially, and then based on the difference, which my feelings on differential dice combat systems, I really don't like them, but based on that difference, something will happen to the losing unit only. Winners in a combat never take anything, and at 14 to 4, it's basically impossible for the defender to win in this combat. So we're going to roll that up, and both rolled a 9, actually, which is interesting. So that's going to be 23 to 13. So you subtract those from each other, so that leaves you with 10. And then you compare that number 10 with the morale value of the losing unit. In this case, it is 4. That is more than double. So that means that the loser's unit routes and retreats 4 hexes. However, artillery, or really any unit in a redoubt that routes is just eliminated. So in the first turn, we've eliminated the first 2 redoubts of the Russian forces. And we're going to go ahead and move these units up here. And they have yet to take artillery fire. They just kind of stormed the battlefield, these Swedish shock troops, as we've seen in this game. So that's how combat works. And you just do that. And as you can see, despite the fact that there was sort of an assault on this redoubt, that there was potentially sort of some abstracted, like the crews manning those guns firing back, or the storming of these walls, like there was literally no effect to the Swedish troops, which does not seem right to me. And I just don't understand why the winner can't take any damage. You would think that at least some of these units would have suffered some losses trying to storm this redoubt with artillery, an artillery group there. So beats me. It's a little simplified for my tastes, and it's like a little bloody for my tastes as well. Like there's no drama to this. It's like I knew going in, as soon as I had more than 10 points worth of strength difference, that I wasn't going to lose, right? So the combat is like very deterministic. So why even have dice at that point? Anyways, well, I guess it's a function. You have dice to make it more random, but it's really a function of the balance here. It's a function of the balance of the units. Maybe as we get to some cavalry charges here, it'll be different, and I'll show you one of those when I do it. Second division of the Russian right got a chance to activate. They raced out here, and they're going to do a cavalry charge against these units. This one in the flank, this one in the front, but they felt they needed to do that because it's a single unit and they don't have a lot of attack strength. This cavalry unit here is not charging. He is going to wait and see what the effect of this particular attack is. I don't think you're allowed to mix them. So the way that you do a cavalry charge, so the first thing that happens is you put the marker on declaring who you're charging at. Infantry are allowed to try and form square. Now there's a risk to doing that. They may not be able to. These guys are actually pretty tough. They've got 12 defense. Do they even want to form square against 4 attack? That seems like this seems maybe like a bad idea. Again, not sure what the Russians are supposed to do if they don't have the ability to attack, but let's do this one first. So we did a cavalry charge. Does this infantry unit want to form square? Probably. He's getting attacked by 4. He's got a defense of 7. I mean, he may have a good chance of repulsing this attack. Well, it's actually 5. 5 to 7. All right, he'll try and form square. So we make a roll, and they basically to form square. There's no leader in the hex. He's not disrupted, so he just needs to roll equal to or less than his morale. It's a 50-50 chance. He rolls a 1. He does form square, and that is going to give him a nice defensive boost, and that's going to cancel this charge. The cavalry pulled up short, and there is no attack. Now, the downside to square is that this unit actually cannot attack, so we're kind of locking him down, which is nice. Here, this doesn't seem to make sense that they want to form square. If they fail, they're going to become disrupted, and they're only facing 2-4 attack factors. This is actually a pretty bad attack. Maybe I should not have charged with them. Maybe I should, maybe now that I've shown you charge, maybe I should change my mind. We're going to do 3 attacks here. Yeah, let's do that. I will show you what happens. And the result of that combat was nothing. No losses on either side. So sort of a skirmish, maybe an inconclusive engagement here. It was not a good roll for the Swedes, but like nothing happened. So what that means is that on a future activation, these units can choose to fight first before they move, and that gives them a +1 in the combat, which could work out in their favor. We shall see. Well, the one thing I can say at this point is at the end of turn 1, at least the game isn't over. That's a good sign. So far, only 2 Russian artillery units lost on the map. We had some dragoons come out here for the Russians. Try and take this unit is inconclusive. The Russian strength is just not really equipped to attack the larger formations of the Swedes. Although the Russian infantry has started to move out, and they may be able to kind of scoot through these woods here and put some pressure on this flank. Really depends on the way the chits come out. The Tsar has moved up here. The reason he's done that is because there's a DRM if he's next to this leader for this every green unit. So the the right flank cavalry, potentially activating more divisions when their chit is drawn, so I want him there. He's also safer there. And it's going to be interesting because we have a line of attackers here, so if they go first, they're going to be able to attack again against these guys, get a +1 bonus for that. Not sure how big that will be. We obviously don't want to be attacking this square unit, but we'll happy to leave him in square where he can't do any damage right now. And I really want to get these units out. The Swedes' left flank moved up to kind of see what happens where these guys go. They can charge here if they come out of the woods. They can kind of maneuver this way or this way if they need to block the advance. So, you know, unfortunately, the Russians were only able to activate one of these divisions, and they decided to go with a cavalry charge up the center to kind of blunt the Swedish middle. So that's where we stand. So far, better feel than the Battle of Narva, but we're still early, so we'll see what happens. One of the things I'm really struggling with this game is either its scale or its abstraction. One of those two things is off somehow because, as an example, I'll show you, we've got these two Dragoon cavalry units. They're charging into the rear of General Lewin and his infantry here. But if these were cavalry, by the wording of the rules, they could make a countercharge even though they're facing away from this unit. And that doesn't make too much sense. Or as another example, if I got a unit way up here who managed to get around the flank, if he came down here and charged these guys in the rear, they'd get a chance to make a countercharge, which doesn't make sense. It's either this game is a tactical game where facing matters, or it's not a tactical game where facing doesn't matter. But the rules and the rules sort of entice you to play in a tactical nature, but then some of this stuff is like super abstract, like this cavalry charge thing in the rear, or not tactical at all. And so I think there's just sort of like an incongruity between the scale the game wants to be and the way it wants you to play, which is, it's highlighted with things like that. Start of turn 4, the Swedes won initiative again, and they've started to put some holes in the cavalry here. This Russian cavalry is pretty garbage. In fact, their whole army, other than this infantry division here, is pretty garbage. I'm not really quite sure how the Russians are supposed to make any progress short of just kind of letting the artillery in these redoubts sort of fire away at the advancing infantry, which I've been trying to do now that I've recognized the cavalry's ineptitude. The problem is that last turn the Russian artillery got plenty of shots and only one of them had any effect, so that's been kind of useless. And in general, I'm still kind of just not a big fan of the combat system in this game. It's just so disconnected from the scale that this game is trying to portray. The one thing I'm super confused about, like in a situation like this here, the combat allows the Swedish player to choose one of these stacks to one of these hexes to attack. So you always attack one enemy in one of your zones of control, which are your two frontal hexes. I don't understand why it's not both. It doesn't make, I mean, these are not like tanks, right? They don't have a turret they're focusing fire on. So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that. It feels very, as part of what makes it bloody and disconnected from the scale, is that like you have these pinpoint accurate musket units that can just shoot at whoever they want and disregard the fact that there's other units in their zone of control. Kind of dumb. But as far as the game is progressing, you know, the Russians launched some pretty good attacks here, and the Swedes just keep rolling really well, and so it's basically caused, you know, there's some disruptions. Both sides recovered from those, so we're just kind of locked in place down here. The Swedish cav on the left flank moved up. Now this first division is in a bad spot to exit these woods. They kind of don't want to do that anymore, so that threat has kind of disappeared. Some of these cavalry units in the 3rd division are now out of command because the Russians lost their cavalry commander in an attack around here, around General I said Lewin earlier. His actual name is it's on a playwright somewhere. It's like Leuven something or other. Here it is. General Löwenhaupt. So he's been kind of anchoring that center, and you know, the overall general here has been just kind of standing behind this center advance. Well, the Swedes won initiative again. They're going to go first with this center infantry, and they're just going to keep trying to press against these shitty cavalry units and overrun these redoubts. Hopefully the chits come in their favor. But so far, the Swedes pretty much dominating this game like they dominated. Well, not as bad as they dominated the other one, but I just don't see a path to Russian victory here, to be perfectly honest with you. unless I had done something maybe like taken the infantry from the fortified camp and sent them up through the cavalry first to confront the Swedish infantry, but then we'd be leveraging our strongest units versus their strongest units, so I think that comes out maybe in a wash. The Swedish units have much better morale, so they're able to not only not lose morale steps after combat if they lose, but they're also able to rally easier. And I get it. The Swedes were a steamroller in this era. They conquered most of northern and central Europe for a reason, but like, you know, just not a fun game to play when it's balanced like that. So we're going to continue on turn 4. Russians still have a chance. They just need to start having the Swedes get some bad luck. Well, the Russians have had a bit of a breakthrough here. They finally managed to get this division activated. They charged out of the woods, surrounded this leader here. It was an inconclusive combat, but he's got issues now where if he has to retreat for some reason, he can't because there's zones of control behind him, and he can't move to a unit's flank, so he's kind of locked in place, which is pretty good. Tsar Peter made a dashing charge from the rear with this particular command, managed to rout one of the Swedish units here and also surround Löwenmeister here as well. And so the Swedes just drew the high command shit, which means they can activate a command. But it's kind of a tough decision here, kind of a Sophie's choice, because if they activate the center command, and they could move out of here, back one, which would help get him out of trouble, but then this guy is surrounded, and the opposite is true if they choose to activate this cavalry command over here. So I'll have to think about what's going on. But the Russians with a little bit of life, a little bit of spirit left in them. So we are in the end of turn 5. Swedes won the initiative. They chose to activate this command here, the left flank, just because they could mop up those cavalry, and they did mop up those cavalry. They're up to 22 points to the Russians 4. Russians got lucky, drew the right flank, rolled maximum for their divisional activations, just made an attack here, fully surrounded. General Löwenmeister and his cavalry managed to fight off this attack. Which is surprising, but not totally unexpected given the way that this game's dice differential combat system works. So now we're about to check the morale of all of these guys, and because Russian units are pretty much shit in this game, they're probably all going to disrupt or rout. So really fun times. All right, beginning of turn 7, and I think we're going to call it there. There's just, I mean, there's not even enough units left on the board for the Russians to make up the difference. Right now, the score is 28-8 for the Swedes, and that's not counting the points they're getting for 4 redoubts. That's not counting the likelihood that most of these Russian units rout off the map next turn. I mean, look at how many, essentially the Russian army is disintegrated. And the game's become a chore to play, to be perfectly honest. I hate die differential combat systems. And this one has probably the worst one I've ever seen. There's also a lot of weird stuff, like you can stack more than one unit in a hex, but then there's no rules about, well, so there's facing rules, but then there's no requirement about one unit, like both units having to face the same direction, and so you get into kind of weird situations with that. I think this game could have been vastly improved if there are some real small tweaks, such as units having to attack both frontal hexes if they attack. That would have kept sort of the more linear formation style warfare that this was for the most part. But as it is, you can kind of like surgically choose who you're targeting, and it just doesn't make sense. I've gone over that a whole bunch in this video. What was likely to happen in these final turns? You know, there's a couple Swedish units routing. They may or may not have routed. The Swedish left flank over here was in complete control. They could have done a couple of things. They could have attacked these weak Russian cavalry units. They more than likely would have probably come around, captured this village for points, captured this village for points, and then they're in the rear of the Russian army, and that's not great. The Swedish right here was doing just fine, holding their own against the Russian infantry. There's not very much Russian artillery left, and the ones that are here and here don't really have a clean shot. Maybe here they have a clean shot, you know, but the worst that's going to do is rout some of these center infantry units. Yeah, there's just not enough points left on the board for the Russians to sort of make up the difference here. The Swedes have probably won this battle. There's no use fighting it to the last man, and that's not what would have happened historically anyways. So we had finished the Battle of Poltava after 7 turns. I went with it a little bit longer than I probably wanted to. And I guess, you know, is there anything else I can tell you that I have not? You already know my complaints. I really wish... This is not great Battles of History, let's put it that way. It doesn't seem as well thought out or as historically thematic, I would say. I really do like the art on the maps. I think the art is great. I think the scenarios as they are set up are interesting. I just think the mechanics swing wildly in favor of the Swedes, which, you know, could be to achieve a historical outcome, but I really wish there was some parity in the sides to these battles. And there's not, so it doesn't make for a great 2-player experience, and it doesn't make for a great solo experience either. I really like the counter art, and I really like the chip pull activation system. And, you know, on paper, there's a lot of cool things here. It just, in practice, the die differential combat system, most of all, is just wildly out of whack with the rest of the game. You know, this would have been a game where maybe a CRT or a cohesion system, which they kind of have with the routed, but that's the other thing I should mention, is that disrupted units in this game, there's almost no effect. You go, it's like, here's my comparison. Units in this game are like avocados. They're like fine, they're fine, they're fine, and then all of a sudden they are just like abysmally done, right? In a span of like 5 minutes. You can have a disrupted unit and it has like almost no impact on the combat, doesn't reduce their combat strength, doesn't reduce their effectiveness. They can still, really the only thing it does is lower their morale value by 1, which is good for probably 1 point of attack value. But when you're talking about attacks that are like 15-9, 20-10, whatever it is, it's like pennies. A drop in the bucket when it comes to comparing values. And so, you know, a unit that's disrupted doesn't really feel like they're disrupted, and then all of a sudden you move from disrupted to routed, and when you're routed you are useless and you're running off the edge of the board. It just feels out of whack. I think the terrain doesn't play enough of a role. If you're gonna have modifiers for terrain, it needs to I think have an effect. Like forest is like +1 for defender. Well, if I'm being attacked with 25 attack strength and my defense is 2, it doesn't matter that I'm in a forest, right? So the terrain ends up becoming meaningless. I do wonder if this game would have been better served with a D6 system rather than a D10 system, because then there would be less of a delta, right? It would be more even, and the actual modifiers would actually matter a lot. Leaders modifiers would matter a lot. Terrain modifiers would matter a lot. So, you know, maybe that's something, if someone else owns this game, that they can try. But regardless, you know, sometimes we play games that we like, sometimes we play games that we don't like, and sometimes, you know, we play a game about a subject matter we really like, but the game is not great, and this just happens to be one of those particular instances. So I've got a lot of, coming up. So like I've said, you know, we've got Scorpions in a Bottle from Third Winter, as you hear, might tackle that. Currently still learning Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. May crack open Roads to Gettysburg. Roads to Gettysburg, is that the one I have? I'd have to double check on that. But I may crack open a scenario there and learn that. So, you know, I do like a more operational flavor than tactical flavor anyways, but, you know, we just don't have as much content on the Great Northern War as I think we should. So, that is all I've got for you here, and I will see you in the next video, and hopefully we enjoy that game a little bit more.